what felt a little off to me was a name I came up with for Kamal. Before it was called Kamal, it was called Mursk,
Oh yeah.
Mrsk. And that name,
Oh.
purely by circumstance or coincidence, happened to sound like a major shipping company based out of Denmark called Maersk. And when I picked that name, they didn't take too kindly to that. In fact, they took so poorly to that that when I showed up in Copenhagen airport at one point, I was greeted by two very pleasant but quite stern police officers who pulled me out of
Stop it.
line in the passport line and served me with papers from Maersk because they had a
No.
copyright case.
Welcome to REWORK, podcast by 37 Signals about the better way to work and run your business. I'm Kimberly Rhodes from the 37 Signals team, joined by the co-founders Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson. If you have followed 37 Signals at all, you know we have many products, all with creative and unique names. I thought we'd talk a little bit about how some of those things have gotten their names, not only our products, but then open source projects that we've worked on as well. Maybe we start with the most recent, being Fizzy. That one has had a couple of names during the building process. Was Fizzy, was renamed, back to Fizzy. Let's start with that one, and then we'll kind of dive into some of our other product namings and kind of where this process comes from. Jason, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I'll just say that for me, it doesn't start until there's a name. I just kind of have to find the name first. That actually is the fuel that fuels the rocket for me personally.
Like at the very beginning, like I have this idea and I want to name it.
Usually a name. A name either comes first or in conjunction with the root of the idea. But if I can't find a name for something early, it's actually kind of a sign to me that maybe there's something that's not here. Something's missing. That's just how it is for me. I just like finding that first name. Then when you get the name, when the name feels right, it's just this really great anchor that you can use to step up or grab onto and pull yourself through, right? So with Fizzy, it started out as Splat because the idea initially began as a bug tracker, and someone had brought up at a meetup that it would be cool. But the bug tracking idea came after the name actually, but the idea was bugs hitting a windshield, and then oh, that's a cool way to think about bug tracking is looking at a windshield and having all these splats of dead bugs on the windshield. And so just Splat came out of that naturally, and that sort of we got excited about Splat. That's a cool product name. And it also tied in with the name, with the design idea that we had initially, which was the bugs in the windshield, and that's where we started. Now, at some point along the way, the splat concept sort of ran out of legs because the splat shapes literally was splats, shaped you could imagine throwing water at a window or color at a window and just paint splatters, right? And the shapes were so complex, there wasn't enough room to write text, and it kind of got messy at a certain point. We're this doesn't work anymore. So we changed to bubbles, more rounded shapes. And that's where Fizzy came from. Splat didn't make sense anymore because these weren't splats. They were more like carbonated bubbles rising in a glass, kind of bubbling up. And the interface initially was bugs with a lot of activity would bubble up. And so Fizzy came from that. And then eventually Fizzy, we kind of went away from the bubbles, but there's still some bubbles in Fizzy, and so it's still kind of stuck. And then we actually tried to rename it at the end to Boxcar, which is another name we came up with sort of at the end, which I still have affinity for, but I agree it has this slightly awkward sound to it. It's not quite as elegant in a sense as Fizzy. Fizzy is again more fun. The interface is very colorful. Boxcar would work as well, but Fizzy we did go to Boxcar.
Tell us the reasoning, because you had a reason for it becoming Boxcar.
I was Fizzy doesn't work for this product anymore because now we're using rectangles, cards. And then I just kind of had this, I was thinking about things and I had this. So in Chicago used to be a big train city. It still is. But downtown where there's currently Millennium Park used to be a huge convergence of tracks. And you used to be able to walk over this bridge and look down on it. And if you look down on it, you'd see all these colorful boxcars on these tracks. And I just started thinking well, these cards are colorful and you move them along a stage, kind of moving in transportation style down tracks, which we kind of had these fins, these thin columns. And it all kind of looked to me like this idea of colorful train cars, which if you look at train cars, they typically are painted in bright colors, blues and yellows and reds and burgundies and greens oftentimes. And if you look at a cargo ship, you'll see all these colorful containers on the ship. It just kind of, and the ratio of the car to the container size is kind of similar. So it kind of just made sense in a way. But David, like before we were actually going to really finalize it, David's like, I don't know if I like Boxcar, or like, I forget what you said, but it's something like, I prefer Fizzy or whatever. And it's sort of in the back of my head too, that even though I like Boxcar a lot, Fizzy, I kept saying Fizzy. Sometimes that's just momentum, but also it comes out in a cleaner way. The word just sounds better. It's more fluid in a sense. And so we fell back to Fizzy again. And I'm glad we did. I still like Boxcar, but Fizzy's a better name, I think, ultimately for the product. And so that's what stuck. And it still kind of has these bubbles that bubble up and attach to cards as they're about to expire. So I feel like there's still enough justification, even though it doesn't need any anyway, but there's still some of that there in the product name itself.
And I think this is one of the traps occasionally around naming, is that you believe that the concept has to be 100% congruent. It's not always you're that lucky. Basecamp perhaps is the most idealized, perfect name where everything does come together. The sound is just beautiful. The iconography is just perfect for it. And the concept of coming together around a Basecamp is wonderful. You're not going to be that lucky every time. You're not going to be that lucky every time. And if you have to choose between something that sounds pleasant versus something that is conceptually slightly more on point, I prefer sounds. I prefer something that is pleasant to say. And I think Fizzy really falls into that category. It's a fun word. And so much of the design around Fizzy is about fun, is about more color. Boxcar had a really cool conceptual tie-in. And I love, as Jason is telling it, not just a conceptual tie-in, but a personal one. In Chicago, 37 Signals founded there, seeing these train tracks that connected to the Fizzy. But like, these are a lot of steps. You're not going to explain that entire lineage of how that name came to be to someone who just sees it in a spare of the moment. And Fizzy, not as perfect, not as conceptually tight, just fun. It just has some of that. And I think it's funny because when Jason originally said Boxcar, I was like, Boxcar. Like, it's a very, I almost feel like you're running into something like Boxcar, right? Like, I get 2 punches of it. And I'm like, all right, let me give it 5 minutes. One of my favorite Jason essays. Give it 5 minutes. And I think we gave it probably 2 months. Nah, not 2 months, like 6 weeks or something, 7 weeks. And I kept thinking, I don't want to say the word. I actually like how the characters look. And we had this fun idea that since you couldn't get, or we couldn't get boxcar.com, we could get box-car.com. And there's an even greater conceptual, like little train links between the carriages here. They're linked together. And it just became, I think, for me, all the payoff was in the cleverness and on the high-minded conceptualness. And Fizzy was just like a very more lowbrow. It just sounds fun. It just sounds nice. It's just got Fizzy. It's got that to it. And a lot of the names that I've come up with in open source are very similar in many ways. Omarchy, for example, is a funny one because, first of all, the way I pronounce it is not how most people read it. Right. First of all, I like just cut off the R. Where does that go when I say Omarchy? Like, left to be. But most people actually say, when they read Omarchy. And I don't like how that sounds at all. I don't freaking care if that's what you read. Like, I don't like that sound. Omarchy. Like, that almost has like a European flow and sing to it, right? Like Omarchy. Like, no. That's not right. So some of the times you can even come up with the right word or phrasing for it. And the magic is in the pronunciation. Again, maybe this is one where I'm going to end up like the creator of GIF, who wants it to be called GIF. And like literally no one else in the world except for the guy who came up with it calls it GIF, right? Because we all just decided that sounded wrong. But that massaging and experimenting and trying with it, I think, is a huge part of the satisfaction of starting new projects. I completely agree with Jason that until there is a name, there's just ideas. Like, the name is the banner. That's what we can carry forward, rally people around, just even have something to address it as when you're discussing it with teammates. And a nice banner is half the morale. If your banner looks shit, who's going to want to fight for that? Who's going to want to charge up the hill with that? No one. That's who. So I love finding these words, and I love finding also words, as you can say, like we had a streak with Basecamp, Backpack, Campfire. Those were the three. I think they came right in a row. Where like you have perfect unity of naming, and I still look back upon that and go like, hot damn, that was really good, right? Like they all fit together. They describe their individual products very well, but then taken together, it's a whole symphony. We don't have a symphony anymore, and I think also that's totally fine. Like we don't have the Apple uniform aesthetic. We have a lot of different experiments. This is the same thing I found with Kamal, which is the name for our deployment tool. And I just thought it's a fun word from Arabic that I hadn't tapped into that vibe before. And then it also just happened to be this navigational tool that I thought conceptually applied very well, but just the fun of it and the different domain of it really worked well. So I think you should actually take that seriously. And I'd actually take it so seriously that getting the clean domain is not even that important. Like when we picked Basecamp, when Jason came up with Basecamp, we didn't have basecamp.com. I think it took 10 years maybe of BasecampHQ.com having enough success with Basecamp that we could afford the Basecamp.com. But I wouldn't have wanted some other name just so we could have gotten the .com. I think oftentimes there's an over-indexing on, can I get the domain? Otherwise, I can't use the name. Now, sometimes that's true because there's something else in your category that's called that. And it's going to be confusing. You don't want that. But otherwise, I'd bias towards having that beautiful banner that you can rally around and you just feel like motivated to show up and make this thing real. I want to release Kamal. I want to release Omarchy. I want to release Fizzy. Because in part, because they're just fun words that should exist in little mental spaces in people's head.
By the way, the first 4 products, the domains, none of them were the exact domains. So it was BasecampHQ.com. It was BackpackIt.com. It was CampfireNow.com and HighRiseHQ.com. We've, obviously we went in a different direction later on. We finally got Basecamp.com. And with Hey.com, we felt like that was very important. For the primary reason was, first of all, I thought it was a perfect name for an email system, but also because we're giving out domain names and email addresses. We want a really short 3-letter domain, which is an amazing thing to be able to have, like David@hey.com or whatever it would be, or Bill@hey.com. So like HeyHQ.com would not have been a desirable email address, but Hey.com was. So we have spent some money. Once was another place we spent some money on a domain name. So we've done it, but it's a luxury now. We can afford to do it. It wouldn't make any sense to do that early on.
Okay, and Fizzy is fizzy.do. Tell me about that. Did we try to buy Fizzy.com?
No, didn't try to buy it. Someone had it and they weren't, I don't know, maybe they would sell it. Didn't seem like they would. It was like I think a hair care product or something like that. I can't quite remember actually what it was. It was some beauty product, I think, maybe. Someone have to double check. What was it?
For frizzy hair? Fizzy for frizzy? I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe it's just I have frizzy hair. I don't know what it was. But I thought it was like someone check it out. Maybe I'm off on this, but it was something like that.
It's close? Hair clips, actually, to
hair
hold
clips.
Your hair.
So I knew it was a hair thing. Okay, hair clips. Anyway, like I don't know. It also just like, I think, it just didn't seem worth it. Fizzy Do is actually kind of fun. Now, the reason it's Fizzy.do is because for a long time we had an AI feature kind of thing in Fizzy called Fizzy Do. And that's sort of where the domain came from. But it's kind of also action oriented, which is kind of fun. And it was just available. So we went with it. And it doesn't mean a whole lot beyond that.
Okay. Are there any names over the course of this 25-year history where you've been like, yeah, we don't love that one? You might not. You might love them all.
I mean, I think, well, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I think Basecamp and I think Campfire. Campfire is maybe one of the most perfect product names like I think we've ever had, and I think has ever been, honestly. It's like a chat tool, sitting around a campfire, a group of people talking. It's like the perfect name for a product like that. I don't know. I'm not sure if there's any names I didn't really like that much. I mean, now I'll tell you, like for High Rise, we originally wanted to use Sunrise, which would have been sort of in line with the Campfire backpack base campy kind of thing. But we were afraid of Sun Microsystems. Remember at the time, like suing everybody. They were like suing everyone if you use the word sun in your product. So then we came up with Highrise, which is like, it's a CRM tool for businesses and contacts and like, business, like a skyline has like kind of a vibe, and like a Highrise is in a skyline of like a businessy thing. So we went with that. I don't know. I like all of our names. I don't think there's anything that's like felt really off to me. David, you, anything?
Well, what felt a little off to me was a name I came up with for Kamal. Before it was called Kamal, it was called Mursk,
Oh yeah.
Mrsk. And that name, purely by circumstance or coincidence, happened to sound like a major shipping company based out of Denmark called Mursk. And when I picked that name, they didn't take too kindly to that. In fact, they took so poorly to that when I showed up in Copenhagen airport at one point, I was greeted by two very pleasant but quite stern police officers who pulled me out of line in the passport line and served me with papers from Maersk because they had a copyright case, which I was actually sort of impressed by. That here you have this tentpole company of the Danish economy being so irked by this homage, if you want to look at it in that way, of a name for an open source tool, that they would literally get the Danish state to send the police to pick me up in the passport line just to serve me papers, which then turned into this long, or not even that long, turned into a legal thing where I got kind of indignant about it and flippant about it and realized that, you know what? These kinds of legal systems are very different. That even a company as important as Maersk in Denmark had very limited ability to come after me, or rather, they could get the police to show me some papers. But even if the most severe outcome of a legal battle should come to pass, I'd owe them like, I don't know, $7,000, which is nothing, but also is kind of pathetic compared to if this was America and someone sues you for lost damages or reputation or whatever, and suddenly you owe $192,500,000, right? I just thought it was cute. Like, it was such a cute thing. Oh, it's little Denmark, they've got these little laws, and like the worst thing that could happen to you is like you owe Maersk $7,000. Ended up changing the name anyway to Kamal, which I really enjoyed for the other reasons that we talked about. But that was a name that probably got me into the most trouble of any of the naming I've done in a long history. We've had other skirmishes, maybe, if you want to say. I'm trying to remember.
Oh yeah, you know what it was? It was a Haystack.
It was Haystack. That's right.
Wait, was Haystack a product?
Did they file against us? They opposed our trademark registration.
They sent us some letters, and I think at the end of the day, we're like, it's just not worth it. I forget what we changed. Okay. Actually, that's probably the product name I like the least. We changed it to Sortfolio.
Okay,
yeah, that's an unpleasant,
not a good one. But say. Anyway, we ended up selling that business or selling that product.
Maybe because of that. Maybe we would still have been running it if it was still called Haystack. But Sortfolio, yeah.
But what we do have is we have haystack.com, which is like by far our most in-demand domain name that people keep trying to buy from us.
Oh.
And it's just, we get emails all the time about it.
Did you get that far?
What?
Did you ever get far enough that someone made you an offer?
People make offers of tens of thousands of dollars.
Tens of thousands, yeah.
But it's just fun to keep.
What's your threshold? Like, when would you actually consider it? Is it the hundreds of thousands?
$1 billion. I'll sell it for. I don't know. It's fun to have something everyone wants and that you don't need the money for. Actually, I just kind of enjoy that. Like, it wouldn't affect the bottom line of the business. So I kind of like, let's just hang on to it. It's fun. Who knows? Maybe we'll use it for something else. Maybe not. We also have Single File, which is how David and I kind of met, really, in a sense. And that's still a great domain name, which we haven't really used again. We've got a bunch of good domain names, good product names sitting there.
So when you come up with an idea for a new product, are you also then cross-referencing, like, what do we already own that's sitting around? Or is it like you're thinking about the product specifically and a name?
Yeah, it's a product.
Based on the product.
Sometimes Haystack could have been a good name for Fizzy too. It could have worked, but we didn't like, what's our inventory? What do we have? Because you can use whatever you want. So you don't need to go look at your own inventory of domain names. Yeah, I don't pay attention to that.
Well, let's talk really quick about Omarchy, because it's a mix of words. Tell me how you came up with that. People ask all the time, like, where did this name come from? I know there's a story behind it.
Yeah, so Omarchy is essentially version 2 of Omarchy, which was the first stab I took at creating an opinionated Linux setup. And that was a combination of omakase, which is chef's choice in Japanese. Essentially, you go to a restaurant and you order an omakase meal, a tasting menu, where the chef has just picked out everything. And I thought that fits very well for this. It's a concept that I've long talked about with Rails, that Rails is an omakase framework where I and the others who've worked on it have made a ton of decisions about how the initial layout of the menu is going to be. And if you don't do anything, you're just going to get a great meal. And if you don't do anything with Omacoup, you're going to get a great Ubuntu mix. And then with Omarchy, I thought, I really like that omakase concept. Let's try to bake it into something that fits for this new distribution. And the distribution was based on top of Arch, which is one of the OG Linux distributions that have been around for 20 years that just happened to be perfect for what I wanted to build here. And then Hyperland, which is this tiling window manager. And I thought, here are 3 words and they can fit together Omarchy. And it's actually funny because, as we talked about, a lot of people want to pronounce this at Omarchy. But the main word in the middle there, Arch, no one seems to be confused about how to pronounce that. So I thought it was always kind of curious that this was difficult because I had Arch right there in the middle, and it makes sense because this is a distribution built on top of Arch. But it was very much just trying to string the words together and coming up with something that I liked the pronunciation of, and connecting to the other work that we've done earlier. Oftentimes these concepts come ping-ponging off other things you've done before, and then trying to come up with an iteration that feels unique and special to what you're building now. And Omarchy was really that. And then just the fun of coming up with a pronunciation that perhaps isn't entirely warranted by the letters that are actually in there, that I get to chop something off. And I always thought that was a fun thing to do because the English language and the Danish language is full of that. Full of words that if you look how it's spelled, you go like, how do you get from that to how you guys say it? I'm like, well, someone came up with that idea. Why shouldn't that someone be me? Someone like me who just says like this string of letters is going to produce this sound because I say so. The R is silent.
Omarchy.
One of the things I've always thought about with names, which is interesting to me, I always think about this, is like you have names like I always think of Instagram as a name, which is kind of a stupid name, like a stupid modern name, like for what I was like, is an instant telegram. I don't even know where it came from really necessarily, right? And the thing I always think about is, had it been called something else? So obviously, hugely successful product with a name everyone knows, right?
Right.
Had it been called something else, and then they had a rebranding session 10 years later, and someone pitched Instagram, there's no way they would have picked Instagram 10 years later. And I always think about this with all sorts of, like Yahoo is another great example of that. Like, what had it been called, like, I don't know, Searchmaster or something like way back in the day. And then someone's like, how about we call it Yahoo 10 years later? The big hell no. Slack's probably another example. Like Slack is a popular product. It had been called some other chat thing. And then someone's like 10 years later, let's rename it to Slack. They'd be like, what? Never.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is just like momentum. It's a word someone liked in the early days. WhatsApp is another one. Like what? Like what's up? WhatsApp? Like, would they rename it to WhatsApp today had it been as successful as it has been and they renamed it, 10 years later? No way would that fly. So these names are just like, they become something and they're kind of a product of the moment. And most of these things started, when they were named, they were nothing, and it's actually much harder to think about like naming something successful than it is to name something that's just a pet project. And you can have more fun with it. So my point is just like, I wouldn't take any of the stuff that seriously. Find something that you like for your own project that just rings true to you, that you like saying, and that's enough. Who cares?
That is a perfect place to wrap it up. REWORK is a production of 37 Signals. You can find show notes and transcripts on our website at 37signals.com/podcast. Full video episodes are on YouTube. And if you have a question for Jason or David about a better way to work and run your business, please leave us a video question. You can do that at 37signals.com/podcast question, or send us an email to rework@37signals.com.